So we're very happy to be here today, the FSL Disrupt group. This is our fourth round of book club. We've been working with teachers for quite a while now, since 2019. And here we're going to talk about celebrating joy, specifically in novels and picture books for French immersion from grade 1 to 12. We're so happy to see you again because we haven't had a book club in a little while, and we see that the numbers are very large tonight. So it's such a pleasure that you've joined us. We're going to start off by introducing ourselves each individually. I can get us started. My name is Mimi Masson, and I'm at the University of Sherbrooke. When I started this project, I was in Ontario at the University of Ottawa, working with Amanda and Ruby, and we've had Marika come on this year. And so I taught ESL and FSL for over 10 years in Japan and in Canada. And now I work as a teacher trainer in Bachelor of Education programs, so preparing future teacher candidates. And what's been a lot of fun is initiating the new generation of teachers into this kind of practice and this kind of thinking, and then also getting to learn with all of the veteran teachers here who are doing this work. I'm going to pass the baton to Amanda.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amanda Cloutier, and I am a secondary educator with the Peel District School Board. Currently, I am in a new role, the de-streaming and transitions teacher. But previously at my school, I have taught core and immersion 9 through 12 in both panels, and started the FSL Disrupt project back in 2020. And really thrilled to have spent so much time with all of you developing and really pushing FSL communities around the country. So grateful that you're here. I'll pass it to Ruby.
Hi everyone, I'm Ruby Sharma. I'm a teacher in York Region District School Board, an FSL teacher in both core and immersion and department head for 20 years. I've been so fortunate to connect with Mimi, Amanda, and the team during the pandemic. This was a pandemic baby. The FSL Disrupt project grew from grassroots sharing between FSL teachers across Ontario and then eventually across Canada. We're so excited that you've joined us this evening. We're looking forward to sharing with you some of the learning that we've done and that we continue to do with our students, alongside our students, in a shared learning model with them as we explore disrupting canonical texts, bringing in texts that represent diverse voices and experiences. And most exciting of all is introducing our elementary team. We've had so many folks come to us at our sessions for with CASALT, with OMLTA, asking, when are you going to start an elementary team? It's great that you have secondary, and we're all secondary folks here. So we were so happy that that Asha and Karen and Mandisa, could come on board and bring their perspective from an elementary experience perspective to the project to enrich all of our learnings.
Yeah, so I'm Marika. I'm a long-term occasional teacher with Toronto. I'm also a PhD student at York University. And so, yeah, I got involved with this project through Mimi, who I do a lot of FSL research work with. And very, very excited because a lot of my research focuses on anti-colonialism and anti-racism. And so being able to actually work with teachers and see what everyone's up to and work on the pedagogy side is really fun. And I'm new to the team. I only joined 2 or 3 months ago. So I'm very excited for my first book club session. And I'll pass it on to Asha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Asha. I teach in the Peel Board. I've been teaching for 7 years now in primary and junior. I really enjoy teaching primary and being able to bring language, learning French language in the early years. I was really looking to build community. And I found that there were glimmers here and there of the kind of work that FSL Disrupt is doing that I was seeing in different boards and different friends of mine. And when I found FSL Disrupt, I was so excited as a place to ground the really important work that's necessary to be done. And so I asked about an elementary team, and then I met Karen and Mandisa, and I'm really excited to be a part of this book club and to see how we'll continue our learning moving forward. And I'll pass it on to Karen.
Thanks so much, Asha. Good evening, everybody. My name is Karen Devenish-Mazzetta, and I am a teacher librarian with the Toronto District School Board in Midtown Toronto. And I've been teaching for 27 years. I'm a French as a second language teacher as well. And I'm so proud to get to serve in a community that has a variety of students from all walks of all different social identities, and to get to service them in all of their languages. So we have a very multilingual school at Rawlinson. I've also had the benefit of working for 19 years with teacher candidates at York University, primarily the Glendon teacher candidates who are preparing to become the new French as a second language teachers in our province and all across the country. And myself and my colleague Cecile Robertson a few years ago were introduced to FSL Disrupt, and we're so honored to be invited to participate in one of their book clubs and summer institutes in the summer. And we were just so inspired by the work that they do. And many years ago, maybe even before that invitation, my colleague who's going to speak to you soon, my present colleague at Glendon, Mandisa Bromfield, but a good friend of mine for many years, spoke about putting together a book club for elementary teachers. And it just seemed like destiny when we were asked to come and join your group. And so this is what was meant to happen. So we're so happy to share all of this with you tonight. Mandisa.
Hello, bonsoir, everyone. It's so great to be here. My name is Mandisa Bromfield, and I am a teacher. I've been teaching within the Toronto District School Board for it's amazing to calculate it, over 20 years now. I'm currently, and I've worked in FSL classrooms from all grades K to 8, and working in core, immersion, extended, and as well as centering a lot of the work that I do, especially recently in the early years, working as an early reading coach in both English and FSL environments. So the early years have been a really important core part of my teaching and learning journey. I'm currently on a secondment at York University Collège Glendon, and I have as Karen mentioned, well, I have the honor to work with Karen, and as well, I've been honored to join this team in FSL Disrupt. Yes, it feels like destiny. It feels like exciting, groundbreaking work. And I'm so happy to be here, and I hope that I can continue on this teaching and learning journey, doing some really important work, disrupting our systems that are colonial systems that sadly are in some cases harming students. So hopefully we can do exactly what this group is entitled, Disrupt, and center FSL learning and do it with joy. So thank you, everyone, and I'm really excited about this evening.
Ok, oui. Donc oui, on a un peu mentionné là dans les introductions la création de l'équipe qui va s'occuper de développer des ressources au primaire avec vous. Et donc, on est vraiment, vraiment content d'avoir cette possibilité parce que comme Amanda nous a dit, on a eu beaucoup d'entre vous qui nous ont demandé. Donc, j'espère que vous êtes là ce soir pour inaugurer cette nouvelle équipe. Puis, je vais peut-être vous laisser parler, Asha, Mandisa et Karen, si vous voulez un petit peu présenter vos objectifs ou ce que vous voulez faire avec votre projet ou dire quelques mots à nos participants.
Je pourrais commencer. Alors pour moi, je sais, comme Mimi avait dit, il y a beaucoup de personnes qui voulaient faire ce travail en communauté. Et souvent, je trouve avec immersion, on fait nos travaux dans nos salles de classe et il y a la difficulté à parler aux autres, à avoir des ressources, de savoir comment utiliser les ressources, comment on utilise par exemple un livre dans une salle de classe d'immersion, c'est vraiment différent qu'une salle de classe francophone ou en anglais. Alors, il faut avoir l'expérience d'être en immersion pour comprendre comment ça se passe dans les salles de classe. Et aussi, comme Karen avait dit, nous avons beaucoup d'élèves qui sont multilingues. Donc, pour eux, le français, c'est leur troisième, quatrième langue. Alors, comment on enseigne le français à eux, c'est très différent. Et c'est dans beaucoup d'écoles, dans beaucoup de provinces et à travers le pays. Alors, c'est vraiment, on voulait commencer l'équipe primaire pour commencer une communauté ensemble, pour parler entre eux autres, pour partager les ressources. Et Karen m'a dit ça, je ne sais pas si vous voulez ajouter.
Peut-être que je peux juste ajouter que du fait que beaucoup des ressources qui existent, ou désolé, en premier, j'ai entendu discuter de beaucoup d'enseignants et enseignantes qu'il n'y a pas assez de ressources, qu'il n'y a pas assez de ressources, il n'y a pas assez de ressources, comme Acha a mentionné, en français, ou qui sont disponibles et où nos apprenants de français comme langue seconde peuvent vraiment s'engager avec. Donc, ça, c'est un défi, mais franchement, on voit beaucoup plus de ressources maintenant que jamais. Donc, c'est avec le partage des ressources qui existent et aussi le partage et l'enseignement des ressources qu'on peut faire et dans beaucoup de différentes manières. Donc, c'est avec ça qu'on peut continuer à développer les programmes de français comme langue seconde, particulièrement dans le niveau primaire.
Merci beaucoup. Vous avez très bien dit. Donc, je ne sais pas ce que j'ai d'autre à contribuer, sauf que en tant qu'enseignante bibliothécaire, souvent, je vois les profs de français langue seconde qui sont isolés dans leur salle de classe, dans leurs écoles, qui trouvent des nouveautés, des ressources excellentes, qui savent très bien comment les aborder avec des enfants pour qu'ils puissent voir la diversité qui existe au monde, pour aborder certains sujets que des gens trouvent sensibles, peut-être trop sensibles pour des enfants, mais ils font d'une façon efficace. Alors là, je trouve que ce groupe nous donne l'occasion de nous rassembler et de partager tout ce qu'on fait avec nos étudiants. Et on n'a souvent pas ces occasions dans les écoles, on n'a souvent pas assez de temps, assez de soutien. Donc, voici l'occasion où on peut même suggérer les ressources, mais aussi comment aborder certains sujets qu'on trouve peut-être, entre guillemets, sensibles, mais nécessaires pour que les enfants puissent se reconnaître dans les lectures qu'ils lisent à l'école. Donc, j'espère que non seulement vous allez avoir l'occasion d'apprendre, mais aussi de partager et contribuer à cette belle communauté.
Donc, vous voyez, on parle tous ensemble dans notre groupe, on communique beaucoup et on espère pouvoir faire ça avec vous aussi, hein, notre audience ce soir, parce que c'est vraiment un travail collaboratif, comme nos collègues viennent juste de le dire. On va juste vous parler un petit peu là des objectifs du projet FSL Disrupt. And I'm just switching between French and English pour être bilingue, mais je vais passer à Amanda qui va nous en parler un petit peu.
Just really quickly, it sort of has been alluded to with everything everyone has said. FSL Disrupt began in 2020 with the goal of trying to identify novels that could be used in the secondary FSL classroom that not only met the interest level of students in the secondary panel, but were culturally responsive and reflective of the students that we had in our classes. And also, finally, at a language level that was appropriate for them. What we were finding is that when you looked for novels at that age range in French, they were very often destined to a Francophone audience, and therefore the language level was too high. And that's where this project began. Since then, 3 years has gone by, and we have developed sort of two panels, sort of two streams of how we sort of go about our sessions and our professional growth as colleagues. We have a sort of series that we are now calling Grow the Database. And what previously was our book clubs are now these, where the idea is that People bring new books that they have recently read and are able to offer a review of them as an FSL teacher. For example, tonight I have 2 novels that I have recently read, and I look forward to sharing the plot summary as well as some insights with you into how they can be used in the secondary FSL classroom. We are also this year going to be inviting some colleagues into sharing how they are using their novels in an FSL classroom. And this is the Practice Makes Progress sessions. We know that practice does not make perfect, but we want to learn from one another and see what they are doing. So that's FSL Disrupt in a nutshell. If you are new here, we're so excited for you to be here. And we're going to go through a quick recap of what the sessions are going to look like and some sort of background information before we jump into everything, just some sort of points for consideration. We are very grateful to those who have read a book and are prepared to share it this evening. And if that's not something that you had previously committed to in advance, but you're loving the energy and you're like, yes, I know a book. I've recently read a book. Let's bring it. Please, this is a collaborative space. This is not a presentation. We would absolutely love to hear from you. Some of the early book clubs that we did, to me, during COVID times, felt like Scholastic Book Fair, but for teachers, because my Amazon list was full of the new novels, and I love to hear from what other people are doing. So if it so beseeches you and you're like, yes, I want to share, here are some ideas on what you can do. Another key criteria for our novel selection is, of course, the language level that is being used in the novel. So just try to keep in mind, for example, I know myself, Ruby, and others may use the CEFR language levels. Maybe if you just want to hop to the next slide. In order to sort of determine what is the language level of my novel, what is the language level of the learners in front of me. That might be one space, but that is definitely something you want to keep in mind when you are sharing. And new this year, we are trying to center novels related to joy. And I'm going to pass la parole to Ruby here to just sort of clarify this mission, provide some insight, because it's a really, really good, profoundly deep goal that we've got here.
Thanks, Amanda. So those of you who've attended previous book club sessions or have seen us speak about the project, maybe at conferences that we've attended, know that this is ongoing learning, ongoing sharing, and it's teacher, as Mimi said, it's about teacher collaboration, and who better than to get a reference or a recommendation for a book than from another teacher who's actually using that book in their classroom. How are they using it? What challenges does the text pose in terms of teaching to students? How are students reacting? So this is really what we wanted FSL Disrupt. And for those of you who haven't been to the website, I've placed the link in the chat, fsldisrupt.org. You can access the prior learning. All the presentations that we have done is available there. And just to give you a recap, we really wanted to focus originally on unpacking the idea of intercultural understanding, which is in our curriculum, grade 1 all the way to 12. It's the same curriculum expectation, and really talk about building cultural competence. What does that look like? Oftentimes we were ourselves noticing that those intercultural understanding pieces were often relegated to maybe the end of a course or tacked on, and were relegated maybe to a project or research, as opposed to really being centered. We also wanted to unpack, whose voices are traditionally centered, whose lived experiences are traditionally centered, and the focus of learning, especially in a secondary context, which is where we began. And we really looked at the canon of French literature and noticed that many voices, particularly those voices of the francophonie, are often marginalized or completely omitted or missing in the texts and the resources that we were using. And so we wanted to create a resource where teachers could find text recommendations to really bring those voices from the margins to the center of learning and planning for our courses. And so on our site, if you haven't again visited our site, for those of you who are new to FSL Disrupt, please have a look. We have text recommendations, novel recommendations there, and slides from prior learning as well. One of the central foci of prior learning was trauma-informed teaching as well, because a lot of the texts that we had at first brought forward and surfaced had a lot of issues that were challenging, difficult. We talked a lot about trigger warnings, about contextualizing culturally, socially, politically, historically texts for students so that they could understand. We noticed very quickly that a lot of the texts were perhaps focusing on stories of challenges, oppression, and oftentimes stories that are difficult, and those topics, those subject matter is important to tackle with students, but so is joy, so is celebrating excellence. And so how can we balance and redress this balance so we're not just showing certain groups or certain marginalized groups as only having experienced trauma? We don't want to re-stereotype, right? So we want to be critical of our own work as well. And that's what led us to the work of Goldie Mohammed. I hope that many of you are familiar with her work. If not, we highly recommend, and we've been working with and doing some of our own learning with Cultivating Genius and Unearthing Joy. Those are two of the texts that Goldie Mohammed has written. And really, they center around the idea of, what are what are we helping our students to learn about themselves or about others? What skills and content learning, standards are we teaching to? And how can we question what those standards and ideas, how can we unpack the bias or stereotypes that exist within that? And then beyond that, how will we engage our students in thinking about power, about equity, about anti-oppression in that text, in society and in the world? But how can we also advance students' happiness? How can we elevate beautiful images, truthful images, complex images, and narratives that express that life is full of challenges, but that there's also joy to be found in life experience? And how can we not necessarily focus or surface only trauma and challenge and maybe diminish or not account for or discuss the experiences of joy that are shared in these novels? And so we thought about shifting our selection process and our criteria for this particular book club. We're very excited to share with you some of the texts that we've selected where we can surface experiences of joy, examples of excellence as well in the novel. So we're excited to share that with you tonight in our breakout rooms. All right, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us in the secondary room. I see some familiar names. Feel free to jump in if you have a text recommendation, or if the book we're talking about is something that you're interested in, you have particular questions about, or if you've tried the same book. So we would love to get a variety of opinions, feedback on the text. So please join in. It is a collaborative discussion. We invite you to do so. So a little bit about secondary immersion. So I'm a department head at a school in York Region, and we have implemented slowly over the past 2 years, and then previous to that at my previous school over 5 years, a book club model. And the idea of a book club, just to contextualize the book I'm going to talk about tonight, this would be one of 5 choices for grade 11 French immersion. So we didn't start with 5 choices, just to be clear, and I don't recommend doing that. It's a lot to manage for the teacher. We started with 2, and we had half the class reading one book, half the class reading the other, and thematically the books were connected. So we chose them with that kind of idea in mind, that there's a particular region of the francophonie that we'd like to look at. So for grade 11 Immersion, we look at Le Maghreb et l'Afrique. And so we wanted to center novels that have characters from those parts of the world, from those countries, authors also who are from that région du monde. And we also, another kind of idea that we wanted YA novels. So we wanted novels that are specifically targeted to teen readers, have teen characters as much as possible if we can, in order to engage students in terms of like the topic, the subject matter being appropriate for them. And so right now in grade 11, Immersion, we're going to add this book, semester 2. This is Le Voyage de Yao, which I'll be speaking about in a few minutes. This book we will pilot with a group of about 5 or 6 students in each of our 2 sections that are running next semester. So in order to pilot a book like this, you'd probably want at least 10 copies. We usually purchase, as a department head, I purchase usually 15 to 20 copies of a book when we start to kind of roll it out. We roll it out with maybe a group, get some feedback, roll it out to 2 groups in a class. This book is as part of this book club. The other books are La Route de Khalifa, which is quite a serious book and very different tone to this book. Another text that we offer as an option is Kif Kif Demain, which is a novel about a young Moroccan woman, teen, who moves to Paris, and her experiences there. It's very much in a style of like a diary or a journal of her impressions of French culture and her place in it as a Marocaine, a Francophone, but not French. Very, very popular book with our students. And we have another novel that we just rolled out this semester. It's Du Pain et du Jasmine, which is a story about a mother and a daughter sharing their experiences, one in the 80s and the other during the Arab Spring in 2009, 2010. And so it's also about Le Maghreb, this time period of like cultural revolt, change, social change. And so these novels are the choices that we're giving to our grade 11 students. So we usually put them in groups of 4 to 6. That's what we would recommend for a book club. We give students different roles to play in the book club, different activities to tackle together. They read independently and come to class having read particular chapters and being ready to discuss. If you want any resources on how to run a book club, what the structure looks like, what a planning calendar even looks like for a 6-week unit or a 5-week unit, please feel free to head on over to fsldisrupt.org. All those resources are there to help your planning. So a little bit about Le Voyage de Yao. So it's Véronique Tadjo, I believe is how you pronounce her name. Again, recommendation is for 10-11 immersion. I think that is more because of the subject matter and less so about the language level. Most likely a grade 10 immersion student could also tackle this. There's nothing too difficult. It is 185, approximately 190 pages. You can see the print. It's not that small, so it's an easily digestible 190 pages. And the story is fairly linear, straightforward, easy to understand. So if I have students who struggle to read or are reluctant readers, I would likely recommend this book. It's a short, digestible read. This book is unique because it is an adaptation of a movie, as opposed to a movie being adaptation of a book. The movie came first and the book came after, which is really interesting. So there's also that as in terms of an extension activity where you could watch the film with the students who are reading this book and maybe do something comparative. I think the characters are much more obviously fleshed out in the novel than they are in the movie. Different perspective in the novel than kind of an omniscient third person in the movie, but definitely find this an interesting read. So a little bit about the story. So we have our book club debrief here. So this is what we would share with folks who are interested in reviewing a book and just would want to go through the questions and just get a sense of what the review might look like. And if you are comfortable in sharing, we could actually publish a review on fsldisrupt.org, which we would love to have your input and share it and publish it on our site with your permission, of course. So again, title of the book is Le Voyage de Yao. Author of the book is Véronique Tadjo. She is writing an adaptation of the film and screenplay of the film Yao, which is the title of the film. This book and the film are originally in French, so it is not a translation. Any content or trigger warnings, I would say there's some, I wouldn't say it's trigger, nothing very traumatic, but I think that there's reference to a character spending the night with another character, and then they wake up the next morning and they're very happy. That's kind of yeah, ooh. And it's from the perspective of a young boy, so he doesn't totally get it, but he kind of gets it. He's like, something happened. I saw him coming out of her room in the morning. He looked very happy, and then she came down for breakfast and they were happy, so they must be in love. But he doesn't get into any details, so just so you know, there is that scene. The story is basically about a young boy who walks from his village to Dakar to see his favorite writer, which is amazing to see that. Who's a Senegalese writer, and this Senegalese writer says, "Oh, thanks for coming to my book signing. You know, that's great." And he's like, "I'm a huge fan of yours." And he's like, "Okay, cool." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to walk back to my village now." And the writer's like, "Hold on, you can't walk back to your village by yourself. You're like 12. I'm going to walk with you, or at least I'm going to walk with you part of the way, or I'll drive you. I'll get my driver to take you." So it becomes this voyage of a little bit of discovery, because this author has left Senegal to find his fortune elsewhere. He lived in France for a time, he was in America for a time, and he sort of has disconnected with his culture a little bit. And so by walking this child back to his village, he reconnects with his culture, with his roots, with food, with the sights, sounds, smells. It's a very like sensory experience of Dakar, and then the villages of Senegal. So I thought you could tell that it's based on a film, because it reads almost like a script, the description of what you're seeing, everything. Obviously in the film, you would see all of it. It's filmed in Senegal. And so this young man, feels responsible for the young boy, and he wants to make sure he gets home safely. And along the way, they meet a singer. He falls in love with her. Then they kind of break up. It's very dramatic. And the boy is watching all of this, and it's kind of multi-layered. He's learning about himself. He has almost like a father figure in this writer, but at the same time, it's about be careful about meeting your heroes. There's also that idea that, when you get to know your hero, you may not always get to know them, as an idealized version of what you have in your mind. And similarly, the writer has forgotten so many aspects of his culture, the taste, the sounds, the colloquialisms, all these manners and things like that he forgot about. One scene in particular is when he's like, "I'm in a hurry, I gotta go." Like, he's used to Western idea of gotta be somewhere at a certain time. And these people in the village have scrounged food together, and are sharing their food with him. And he's like, "Oh, this is rude if I don't eat what they're offering me and sit down and take the time to be with them," as opposed to always being in a rush. So there's those kind of scenes and moments in the novel that really I think lend themselves to conversations about culture, about cultural norms, about traditions, and about rules of sort of social conduct as well, that are similar or different between your culture perhaps and Senegalese culture. So it does explain that and does dive into that with quite some detail. I would say this would be for the older grades, so probably anywhere from 9 to 12 is fine for immersion. I think for cores, this would be a challenge. I would not attempt this until maybe 12 core, and only with a very strong 12 core class.
And why is that?
Because I think that some of the expressions might be difficult. There's quite a bit of argot when they're speaking, and Senegal, there's actually the Senegalese language, and there's a créolisé of we have créolisé quelques expressions en français. Alors c'est un peu, je dirais un peu gênant parfois pour les élèves en cadre de voir ça, parce que ils n'ont pas beaucoup d'occasion de voir ça, mais quand même ce serait bien à leur montrer ça. Quand même, je dirais ce serait nécessaire de leur donner peut-être une liste de vocabulaire ou quelque chose pour les aider un peu. Okay, so I would recommend it. Yes, the book is written by a racialized person, so the author is Black. Does the book feature a Black, Indigenous, racialized persons as the main characters? Yes, all the main characters are Senegalese. The idea of stereotypes, essentialism, I don't think so. I think you see like a variety of people. And the thing I love the most about this book is that often kids have this stereotype that like African countries are all poor because that's what they see on TV. They always see pictures of starving children. And so when they describe this huge city of Dakar with skyscrapers and TV, internet, like, wow, they have that. Yes, they have that. Why would you think they don't? Right. So we unpack, like, even I would say at the beginning, what are your ideas when I say Africa as a continent, or when I name to you, certain African countries, what comes to mind in terms of stereotypes? And then let's unpack those and where do those ideas come from? I think there could be a rich discussion with this book about that for sure. And then village life, right? The idea that the kind of, small town yokel kind of idea is turned on its head, where he doesn't realize how famous he is until he goes to the villages and people know his name. They're like, oh, you have my book here? That sort of idea. So it also even unpacks stereotypes within the culture itself, right? About city folks versus country folks, or folks who live more in the rural areas versus the cities. How does this resource include elements of joy? So many. Like, there's a scene where he's eating food and it's a dish from his childhood, and it just brings him right back to his mom feeding him. And it's just like the joy of those tastes and those sounds and those combination of tastes and who's cooking for you, and that like cooking as love, that whole idea, I think is a huge component. The sounds, the music from his childhood. He sees kids playing a game he used to play when he was younger, and that brings him right back to his childhood. And he's like, maybe I should connect with my family again. Maybe I should call my mom. That sort of idea, I think is amazing touchstones, because they're cultural, but they're also universal. So they work on both levels. And contemporary issues and audiences, I think the idea of, remembering your roots is something that our kids could definitely connect with. I know I connected with that. The idea that certain expressions are not translatable from your language, right? And certain experiences are cultural touchstones, and why those are important to maintain and pass on, because you have two people from two different generations in this story, a young person and an older person, and they're both viewing the same experiences and the same cultural touchstones as being vitally important to maintain those traditions. So I thought that was interesting, and I think kids could definitely connect with that. Definitely, you're going to learn a lot about Senegalese culture in this novel, and that speaks to our intercultural understanding, curriculum expectations, certainly for immersion. And you could definitely do this in a 4 to 5 week unit. If you wanted to do a whole text study, it would be fairly short and easy to do. If you wanted to make it as part of a book club like I'm going to do, I think kids would like to have this as an option to read. So I would recommend it. Does anyone have any questions?
How long was it again?
It's about 180 pages. 100 yeah. And like,
yeah,
the type is pretty large, and there's like empty pages. So it's not that long. It's not like 190 tiny minuscule pages, like with tiny words. Yeah, it's doable. It's a pretty easy read.
I have never even like heard of a movie to novel recommendation.
And I read the book first and watched the movie after. So I did the opposite, but yeah, and I liked the book better than the movie. The movie was good. It has Omar Sy, which is everybody's favorite Frenchman. He's he's a famous French actor. And he's very watchable in the role. It's a very good film, very sweet story.
I see Maria in the chat has said she's seen the movie, but it's visually beautiful.
Definitely, yes. You get a sense of the beauty of the countryside, right, of Senegal. And it's not the image, unfortunately, that we always see of African country. you see on TV, right? So that's also, I'm looking forward to sharing that with my students next semester because I think ça va bouleverser des stéréotypes, certainement.
That's so wwonderful. Thank you so much, Ruby. Just so that we make sure that everybody has a chance to present, shall we now jump to Marie-Hélène, who has agreed to share her recommendation of Le Vent, sorry, I have the title here, Le Vent en parle encore by Michel Jean. Ruby, if you don't mind switching to that slide and click and present, and on va passer la parole.
I'm very, very sorry. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I did read the book very recently. I did enjoy it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't recommend it because there are a couple of things. Well, first of all, it does continue that
Like
negativity,
perpetuate.
that oppression that we're trying to get away from, sorry. But more importantly, there's a rape scene, and it really promotes some stereotypes that I was planning to use the book in a reading group, and I reread it. Having read it a long time ago, I reread it, and I read it as a young adult as opposed to reading it as an adult. And I realized that there are a lot of kids that would be offended, and a lot of families that would have their knickers in a twist if we delivered this novel without all kinds of debriefing.
Okay.
So if you're prepared to teach it intensively, hand-holding, leur faire tout tomber rôti dans le bec, then fine, you could maybe work in that rape scene in a delicate and non-graphic manner, but it would definitely be disastrous to leave it to kids to read in a reading group on their own without any kind of guidance.
Okay, that is very useful because Michel Jean is a well-renowned author, and so I'm sure this has come up in book recommendations when I've been looking for novels. So it's great to know.
It's a great novel.
Okay.
It's a fabulous novel.
Yeah.
I'm sure all the people in this group who pick it up and start to read it will not put it down until they're done. It's an excellent story. Basically, you have a young lawyer whose job it is to provide restitution to some Indigenous residential school survivors. And she's trying to find a particular woman, and it's kind of like a detective novel where she goes through and she tries to figure out the connections, and she goes back to the village and she talks to people and so on and so forth. And it jumps back. We hear the story of this poor girl and her two friends in the residential school and all the horrors that they endured. And there's a mystery and there's a twist ending, and it was very, very good. But proceed with caution.
Okay. Thank you, Marie-Hélène. And I will just put this out there: if you did recently purchase the book, please hold on to that receipt because we do have some funds to reimburse you. But maybe you have owned it because you said you read it when you were young. Okay.
Well, I bought it when you first recommended it in the very, very first book club. I bought 12 titles, 6 copies of each title, and the plan was to do these reading circles. Unfortunately, a lot of the books got cut from our list for a variety of reasons.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But I like the focus of this new direction with the joy.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. And I think that when we get into the more joyful reading, we're less likely to encounter those very difficult. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just say, like, we have novels that we have some challenging things, and we've told students, particularly this year, some of our grade 12s are reading Night by Elie Wiesel. Some of our students are reading Route de Schleife that has a child murder and rape scene in it. And we tell them in advance, this is a trigger, this is a scene, if this is going to be upsetting for you, or you're not prepared, to read about the Holocaust in great detail, or you're not like, this is what, and that's why we always offer choice. I think that book clubs empower students to choose, and then also change their mind, right? Because they might think that they're ready for something, and then they start and they can't. I had a student come to me 3 days into night and said, I can't read this anymore. I'm crying while I'm reading this.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, that's okay. She goes, right now, with everything going on in the world, I can't read this. I'm like, okay, let's get another book in your hands. Let's do something fun, right? Let's do something else. And I think that's okay to have that conversation with a 17-year-old. I don't know necessarily that a grade 9 or grade 10 might not tell you that. It depends also, to do that background work, right, with students, to talk about those issues before you get to the novel, right? You don't just drop the novel and never having talked about the social political issues going on. That's why we always do les actualités. We do all these discussions beforehand. And one of the benefits in immersion is we know our kids, because we've taught them sometimes twice, 3 times in our schools. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Marie-Hélène. I think that's a really important caveat when we're talking about these books. Okay, Amanda's got 2 books.
I do, but beforehand, because Ruby, you're the book club expert, Kim, if you want to quickly answer this, Kim has a question and says, would you do a full class text prior to the book club? And would they both have similar themes? I know that when it comes to my planning, I would love to, but I do not have time for that. I try to do other texts beforehand.
We have, as a team, decided, and I think there's a former colleague of mine here as well, Hillary, who knows this, that in our FI, programming, we often do 3 units and then a project and get ready for an oral exam in the last month. So 3 units are usually media or actualité, then some kind of whole class text, and then a book club, or a book club and then a whole class text. So, and that's usually the whole class text is where because we haven't completely abandoned the classics. So we'll do Les Miserables, right, in grade 10. We'll do Zone in grade 9. We'll do, I like École des Femmes. So I do that one with my 11s. I do Molière. My colleagues like Lavare, another colleague likes Bourgeois Gentilhomme. So we'll do that. And in grade 12, we do Huis Clos because we want to scare them at the end of grade 12. So we'll do some Sartre before we send them on their way. So we do that. Absolutely. I believe in a communal experience, especially when you're doing heavy things like Molière and you're doing, I think plays often lend themselves to a great communal experience. And we have lots of conversations with our colleagues in English. Like, what are you doing? Okay, you're doing book club and a Shakespeare play. You're doing book club and poetry. So we tend to mimic what they're doing in immersion and English. I think that's the best other department in the school that gets it, right? Like, what are we doing together? Let's talk about it. So I always have those very important conversations with the English teachers as well. And they're also, diversifying text. This is not just us, right? Like, English is going through a complete overhaul, especially with the NBE course in grade 11. They're also in the process of rejigging how they think about this. And do we need to do a Shakespeare every year? No, we don't. Maybe we abandon some of the classic novels and bring in some new texts. This is a conversation that's cross departmental.
Okay, cool. I have 2 novels to share with everybody this evening. If you want to press present for me, Ruby, just so the font's a little bigger for my eyes. So the first novel I have to share is this one. It's called Fab by Emily Ouellette. This is the sequel to a novel that I had previously read and reviewed on FSL Disrupt. So this is a bit of a cop-out in that I sort of knew what to expect with language level and length and that sort of thing. And to be quite honest with you, I personally had a really hard time when I knew that that we were going to be doing this session, trying to find a novel that did center joy based solely on recommendations that I could find online. And so that's something that my biggest takeaway from this whole thing, like regardless of the novels that have been recommended, it's important to know that is actually information that's not easily searchable, and it's curious as to why. But it also made me explore sort of what the definition of joy was, and like to make sure that I was centering and selecting a text that did center joy. Um, that was a personal, like, sort of deep dive for me. And knowing that there is this cultivating joy professional development novel, that's something that I'm interested in exploring further. And I encourage all of you, like, we're not going to be here to give you a definition of what joy is. I don't know if one necessarily exists. Marika has been doing some work looking for academic definitions. I ended up landing on one that Vogue had published during the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement a couple of years ago that resonated with me. Yeah, there's thousands of definitions. That's the thing. So just sort of questioning that at the end of the day, because even the two novels I read, I'm like, there's still elements, like there's still negativity, but maybe that's just what a novel is there's always going to be a decline before there's a climax. I don't know. This is where my thinking is right now, folks. So anyways, Fab numéro 2, ça s'appelle L'Étoile. I had read this with the hope that this would be a novel that you could read independently without having read the first one. That is not the case, unfortunately. So if you are interested in incorporating this novel into your secondary classroom, I would suggest that it's more appropriate for a library shelf instead, a classroom library, or your school library, because it really does rely on the initial plot of the first novel. It really pulls on that a little bit.
Is that sequel to L'Après?
No, that's totally different.
Okay.
So this is a trilogy, and they're all called Fab, but it's by the same author as D'Après. Fab, the first one, just a quick recap if you haven't read it, as many people have not. It is the novel that at my school, the grade 9 French immersions read. It is the novel of Fab, that is her name. She's a mixed 12-year-old, 11-year-old, I guess, in the first one, student, who lives with her two mothers. However, right at the beginning of the novel, her mothers decide to split. They live in Montreal and they're getting a divorce, and they're going to two separate corners of Quebec to start their new lives. And what they have agreed is that Fab is going to spend one semester of her first year of secondaire with one mother, and the second semester of the same year with the other mother. And then at the end of the first year, she's going to decide with which mother she would like to live forever. The first novel takes place, and I forget the name of the city, but essentially she goes to high school and she has a really horrible experience. She is bullied. She cannot find her voice. It's a pretty negative time. She is somebody who is so passionate for writing, and then now with the separation of her mothers and then moving to two new schools, she has to give up her, I call it a schism, whatever the equivalent is, her specialization. She was going to be going into a writing specialization, and now she gets stuck in this school in the middle of nowhere that doesn't even have that. And how horrible can your life be? And ends up being placed in an improvisation specialization. And for anybody who's familiar with Quebec culture, we know how important that is to Quebec culture. And she sort of rediscovers herself through the caring lens of a really, really kind prof that sees her potential with writing and bringing it into impro. And at the end of the book, she battles her bully and really knows sort of who she is. So that's how the first one concludes. The second novel, so the one that I have reviewed here, she has now gone to live with her other mother in Rimouski. Yes, Rimouski. And she's like, I love it. I'm on such a high from first semester. I'm killing it here. I know who I am. I know everything that I want. And she goes to school and she's like, never, ever am I going to let myself be stepped on ever again. And she realizes, and if you've ever been to Rimouski or know anything about the area, she walks in and she is either the only mixed kid or one of two mixed kids in the entire school. It's a very white population. And so throughout the novel, we see comments like little microaggressions that she's living with. But what she does in the very first chapter or two is she decides that she's not going to let herself be stepped on. And what ends up is that she ends up becoming the bully in the school because she is so confident. She's so quick on her feet with the improv. And her punishment is that she now needs to create and run an improv group for the school. And it ends up really being a success story. You see her really grow as a character. She has a lot of fun with it. She's really proud of herself, and they do accomplish some really great things by the end of the book. And I am curious now to read the third one to see how she sort of decides what her life is going to look like now that she's done the 2 semesters. I did find that there were a lot of opportunities for joy and sort of finding yourself in and amongst the smaller microaggressions that were present. I did find that she was really good at standing up for herself and calling people out, which I really appreciated as well. And I find that the author put a little bit more effort in this novel in terms of owning the main character's identity as a mixed girl. I found that in the first novel, it was sort of an afterthought, and there was maybe there was like one line of, oh, somebody touched my hair and they didn't even ask me, and it was really weird. Like it was just sort of like a one-off. Whereas I felt like this novel, you see a lot more of her cultural identity come out, like the way she's talking about like arranging her room and the different things that she needs. Or she spends reading week with her best friend and her mom, who are Haitian and whose mom basically only speaks Creole. And there's an entire Creole dialogue with like reference at the back for how to translate it. So the author didn't even translate it. She wrote it in Creole. And just those sort of interactions, I find she owned it a little bit more. I personally didn't think that my students would respond as positively to the sequel as they did the first one, only because she mentions so often her age. Like she makes a huge deal of this being her 13th birthday at the end. And I'm like, oh, my like 15-year-olds, I don't think would be down. The Fab books, this one is, to answer your question, Jocelyn, this one is 202 pages. I have done it as a whole unit novel study. They're quick reads. They're very quick reads. The font size is reasonable. It is not huge. It is not super, super tiny. There is, I guess, quite a bit of Quebecois slang, but any French immersion student would be able to skim it and get the gist of what's happening with the context. So I didn't feel that the language level was too much. And overall, like it was fine. It was positive. It was a good sequel. I am curious to see how it goes. I am a huge fan of the author, Amélie Ouellette. It is a novel that is written in French first. It is not a translated novel. She is from Quebec, so she writes very much about her authentic experiences. She is a white author, and I was disappointed by that when I first did the research for the first Fab novel, that she was writing about a character that she had no sort of relationship with. And then I did a bit of a deep dive. And when I say deep dive, I mean like a deep, deep dive. And I learned that she's married to a Black man and they have 2 mixed children together. And she's trying to incorporate their lived experiences into her novels. So as much as they are not her own experiences, they are very much a part of her life. L'Après is another one, as Ruby mentioned in the chat, by the same author. And it's also fabulous. Very post-apocalyptic, which is really cool. The second novel that I'm going to talk very briefly about, because then we are going to go back to our whole group, is Le Nouveau. This is a translated novel, and I picked it up because I have seen it on like every bookshelf everywhere, from my public library to Chapters to everything. Originally, it's called New Kid. The author is Jerry Craft. As I said, it is translated. It is a scholastic novel, and it is a graphic novel, which is awesome. I'm going to be very honest with you all. I read this in an hour and a half today, knowing that I wanted to present it really quickly. It is a hit with the children, and I was like, let me see why. The writing is so funny that even as an adult, I'm like laughing to myself at like the quirky jokes that are being made and like the funny caricatures that are going on. It's a really, really good time. I also really like the artistic style behind all of this. So the main character is an aspiring artist, and there's often these like cut scenes in the middle of the book where it just jumps to like something from the kid's sketchbook. that's related to what's going on. And I think that that's fun. It breaks it up. It keeps it interesting. We were talking about this before this session began this evening, and I was asking my colleagues here if they had read it or if their kids had read it and if they loved it so much. And Karen mentioned that her kids have read it and it is a part of a trilogy. I was very curious what they had thought about it. So the plot is essentially this kid, Jordan, I believe is his first name, yeah, Jordan Banks, whose parents live in a very urban sort of setting. And it's sort of implied that they have spent every last penny to get him into the best private school that exists. And you see his mom at the very beginning, and she's so thrilled with this decision. And he's got like his back against the wall. I don't want to go. I'm very nervous about this. And his dad is like, you know what, let's see how it goes. And if it doesn't work out so well, maybe we'll get you into the art high school. And it's sort of him documenting his first year at this private school. The book I found I personally as an adult, I was having a hard time reading it from an emotional standpoint because this child is subject to so many microaggressions on the day-to-day that he is documented here that I was like, I feel uncomfortable reading this. It was perhaps an opportunity for a good discussion point with my class as to the lived experiences because it felt very authentic. I'm like, what this kid is describing is everything that I hear about and I do not have to face as a white woman, but it is making me very uncomfortable and it's important to know and to sit with those feelings. So that was really good. Because it is so popular amongst children, I'm very curious to see sort of their take on it, and maybe they just feel very seen. Maybe this is their book that is the mirror for them, whereas for me, it was definitely a window. Very briefly, it is 249 pages, but it is absolutely a graphic novel. And as I say, I did read it in like an hour and a half today because it was delayed in arriving. The graphics are very beautiful. And in terms of a language level, I would say perhaps a grade 11, 12 core would be best, especially if you read it slowly. There's a lot of slang. There's a lot of sort of quips that you might have to look up. The pace of the novel is very good though, and there's lots of little chapters, so it would be very digestible to read. Otherwise, you could totally do this with a French immersion class of your choice. Given the kid's age, I think he does mention that he's 12 in this book. It might be best in a grade 9 French immersion setting.
Please feel free to reach out. Like we have our emails. You can contact us through our website. Please subscribe so that you can get an email about our next book club maybe, and if you are interested in purchasing a book, we have some, and trying it out with students or previewing it, we have some funding that we can offer to reimburse you on a teacher copy, so please reach out to us about that on our website. Okay, folks, thank you so much. Sounds like a rich discussion, elementary. We as well had a great discussion in the secondary breakout room. So happy to see everyone this evening. On veut remercier nos partenaires, n'est-ce pas, au Meltier Cassalt. Et j'ai voulu aussi mentionner, si vous n'avez pas abonné à notre site, s'il vous plaît, allez visiter fsldisrupt.org et on va vous envoyer des petits messages courriels pour partager avec vous les prochains ateliers qu'on va offrir.
Et puis vous remercier tous d'être venus ce soir, d'avoir discuté avec nous. N'hésitez pas à nous contacter. I think if you go to the next slide, I don't know if we put our email on there, but it's fsldisrupt@gmail.com, or you can contact us through our website if you've got feedback, if you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you.
And don't forget, for all our previous sessions as well, you can check out on fsldisrupt.org. The slides are available. We will also make this book club slide available in the next little while. We hope you'll join us on the 20th as well. Merci bien et bonne soirée à tous. Au revoir.